because I live in Hawaii, so I wasn't gonna wear it like this.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it's gorgeous. Ugh.
Thank you.
Yes, this just makes me smile.
Thank you so much. Your instructions are wonderful.
You're very kind to say that. So does anybody else want to show me their coat?
I will actually, because I have a
Okay.
question.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's see it.
Okay, well, now keep in mind, this is just the outer fabric. I'm not as far as Ali, so bear with me. Okay. Okay, so the caul is all basted in, literally, not even sewn.
Okay.
Okay, so I think it's pretty good. I'm having an issue with the sleeves. Tell me if I'm too far away.
You're good.
Okay, so real quick, while I'm thinking about it, it looks like the sleeve is pulling. If I make a very small dart in the pattern, it'll straighten it out.
Okay, now the question I would ask on that is, once you've done that,
Right?
can you still get your arm up?
Well, I don't know. Hold on. So I'm just going to kind of pinch it a little bit. I guess my thought is, right. I mean, I can always email you, but it feels like it's has drag lines.
You're supposed to in a raglan.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you think that's I'm just gonna put the light on, see if I can't see it better. So that's okay?
Yeah. I would not quarrel with that. No.
Oh, thank you. I feel
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Because, you know, and see, this is where I blame stretch fabrics and Photoshop for I think unrealistic expectations that there should be no drag lines ever. And so, you know, when you're fitting, you know, like the cap height on a sleeve, this a little bit of a deep dive, but it's good to talk about it. The higher the cap, the shorter the bicep, more appearance, less mobility. A shorter cap, a longer bicep, more mobility, less appearance. So like if you have something like this shirt that I'm wearing, this has maybe an inch cap height. And so I can get my arms up quite a lot, but when I put my arms down, you get all of this fabric.
Okay.
So when you're fitting a coat, you know, the balancing act is, okay, how much mobility versus how much appearance. And so in, let's say, a tailored set-in coat, you can finesse a little more towards appearance. But when you're dealing with a raglan or a kimono, you're going to have a little bit of drag lines there. It's part of the look of that particular coat.
Oh, thank you very much. I was trying to overthink this, and yes, I did, but I think it's cut on grain. So I thought, okay, that may not be it. When I did that, it fixed it. But if you say that's correct, I'll leave it.
Yeah, because you see, if you start pulling it in, what happens is you reduce the bicep. And if you reduce
Okay.
the bicep, what happens when you raise your arm is the whole coat might start dragging up with it.
Okay.
So, you know, so I would err on the side of mobility for a coat like this.
Great, thank you very much. That actually makes me feel a lot better. Like I said, it's nothing's done, but I mean, I got a welt pocket in.
Hey.
And a pocket. I did the cuff latches. I didn't put it on right now, but this is where I've gotten so far. So
Okay.
I'm really happy.
Good.
I'm very, very happy. And the collar too.
Yay. Yay. Okay, so
Thank you.
anyone else has anything they'd like to ask questions on or show?
Mine's cut out, but I haven't done anything with it.
Okay. Not to worry.
I've been distracted by sundresses.
Okay, I understand that.
Me too.
I mean, that's it, you know, it's like the gay man would of course be would understand about, you know, distracted by the sundresses. So yes. Okay, so anyone else? Questions, comments? Because what I said was I'm going to do a bonus technique, and so the bonus technique is the piping, and so I guess I would like to, you know, find out if there are any questions or whatever before, but we'll have a little. I think that the video runs about 45 minutes because it's kind of a deep dive into piping. But so I thought, you know, any other questions before we begin, and then there are going to be some there's going to be some time for questions afterwards. So
just one for me, Kenneth. This
Yeah.
is pretty general. When after this one class, if I do have a particular issue or so, are you open for me emailing you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh.
You know, because see, this is where I get really, I don't really mind answering people. You send me questions all the time. It's no sweat. really honestly. So yes, absolutely. If you have a question, if you're kind of stuck, please.
Thank you. That's great. I appreciate it.
So Lori, question?
So you're saying I can still I haven't got my ribbon floss yet, so I can still email you my top stitching options and get your advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
I don't see why not. It just, yeah, happy to.
That reminds me of a question I thought of during the week. I tried using button thread on my sewing machine to play with top stitching.
Uh-huh.
And the sound that came out of my machine terrified me. I said, oh my God, now I've broken the
Yes.
friggin' machine.
Okay.
No. So I looked at my machine is not capable of taking anything thicker than a 20. And
Yeah.
this was a 12.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that some machines don't like it.
Yes.
And there was one, a featherweight or something.
Okay, well, the Singer Featherweight is one of the machines. The Singer 301A.
Hold on one sec. I thought I had paper. Oh, this is recorded. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the Featherweight or the 301A, they have the same hook system.
Yeah.
And I put buttonhole thread in the bobbin and in the needle.
I put this in your hard
it
case
looks the
suitcase so it doesn't spray all over everything.
Yeah, so it looks the same from both sides.
Okay, and then is there much difference between buttonhole thread and top stitching thread, or is it the same?
Kind of the same.
Same thickness.
Yeah, kind of the same.
I'm done with one. I'm almost.
Okay.
So did you hear that?
Kind of the same.
Yeah, see, I use one, it's Gutermann Mara 30. So I think it's a size 30.
Yeah.
They make Mara up like size 11, which is really good for some things. But my Bernina, as much as I adore that machine, I love it to death, but it does not like top stitching thread. It just will not do it. Will not do buttonhole. I just understand, like, okay, it's sort of like we accept those we love, even with their flaws. And this is the one flaw with my Bernina, is it just not having it. So I have the featherweight, and I learned that it works on the featherweight, but then I also got a 301A and started experimenting with that. And the 301A just, the top stitching looks the same from both sides. It's just brilliant.
So I should try and look for one of those. I live in the Hamptons, so there's tons of very fancy boutiques. There's one in Southampton that has the most exquisite clothing. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
And just amazing clothing. So with equal price tags.
Yeah.
And basically it's just in the details of the seams and the shapes.
Yes.
So I go there every so often just because I can't help it. The stuff is beautiful. And secondly, now I'm going for inspiration. So I picked up a couple of ideas for one of my summer dresses, which what I have been sidetracked with. Everything had top stitching. There was this one whole collection.
I'm sorry, she didn't clean the dish?
Oh, hang on.
Oh.
And the thread was thicker than what I have here that I bought, that's called button thread, which I bought at the local 5 and Dime.
Yes.
Everything had the top stitching and it was gorgeous. It was a straight top stitching. They had it in a contrast color. It was some color that was in the print, and it made the garment just look night and day.
Yes.
So then I came home and tried it on mine, and the machine made horrendous noises. And then I opened the book and realized you're not supposed to put that thread in.
Yeah.
The top stitching that I saw on these garments, the thread looked thicker than what I bought that says coat and craft. So
okay, because also JP Coates thread, this is just a personal prejudice of mine. I tend to use Gutermann because JP Coates, it used to be good thread back in the day when I first started sewing. The dual duty, it was what it was called, was a great thread. It was a cotton wrap polyester, but then they changed it. The manufacturing is offshore and it's just not the same. So what I would encourage you to do is stick with Gutermann.
Yeah.
The different Gutermann threads, because they're just better, and they're better for your machine, because JP Coates a lot of times waxes their thread to make it smooth.
Yeah.
The wax accumulates in the tension discs.
So where I live, there's no sewing stores. So if I want to,
this is where you
want
to go online and just buy a range of it. So Lori, you have a question?
Oh, I was going to tell her to go to Wawak, they have everything you're talking about as far as thread and all the different weights and
Yeah.
yeah.
What's it,
And
go
they'll ship
where?
it to you.
Yes.
WAWAK.
Okay, thanks.
See, I never know whether to pronounce it Waywak or Wawak or.
I called there one time and they said Wawak, and I'm like,
Okay.
I think Waywak makes more sense, but how
Well,
do you?
why didn't they just leave it at Atlanta Thread Company? Because that's what they used to be called. So anyway,
May I ask a question about
yes,
like
please
if you're
do.
buying one of those machines online? How do you? It's just a roll of the dice if you get one that the electric is good and if it works, right?
Yeah, what I do, I tend to, I don't really buy them online that much, but you look at the feedback to the seller.
Okay.
Because if you have a seller with a really high, really good feedback, then they're not going to sell you a dog of a machine. I got lucky. This was because I had the 301A years ago. A friend of mine gave me his grandmother's, and it was in pristine condition. And so one time, a woman at my church in San Francisco was falling on hard times, and she wanted to sew to make some money. And I had she needed a machine, and I'm like, why not? And so I gave it to her. And
Yeah.
it turned out she never sewed with it, and then she gave it away. I'm like, why didn't you just give it back to me? Anyway, you just have to, okay, just leave it. So I was a couple, 3 years back, I was in the Goodwill one day. I walked in and I saw the case sitting on the counter. And I thought, is that machine? And it was, and it had all, it was just like I remember it. And so like, okay, how much? $85. Okay. And I got this t-shirt, and so I had her ring the t-shirt and the machine up, and it came to like $115. I said, how much was this t-shirt? She said, I think the t-shirt was like $20 or something. I said, I'm not paying $20 for a t-shirt at the Goodwill, so could you please take that off? And she hit a key, and she got this look on her face like she'd done something wrong, but she couldn't figure out how to back out of it. She didn't want to tell anyone because she didn't want to look stupid. And so she said, that'll be $42.50. And I'm like, here's the card. Thank you very much. And I ran. So, yeah. So, if you look at the feedback for the eBay person, you could find one. But really, honestly, that machine, it's gear driven. It'll sew through Masonite. Yes, Kay.
Can I ask? So on your 301A, you use the Mara 30 on both the bobbin and the top. Oh my God, I have to try that. Okay, thank you.
Of course, you want top stitching needles. I mean, that goes without saying.
Right.
But it's just like butter. And I use the longest stitch. This, and it's perfect. And actually, because I'm working on the top secret project for Fortuny, and on Thursday I delivered this. There are 3 bags, and it's like, okay, I wanted to do some edge finishes and such before we actually started making the first bag. And so I used the Mara 30 on my 301A, and he was like, wow, that top stitching is really beautiful. I'm like, yes, it is. Yes, I have a special machine for that.
I keep seeing them. Peter keeps posting, he saw this, he saw that at the Chelsea flea market. And I'm like, I wish he was a personal friend of mine.
Well, the drawback with the flea market these days is it's a little bit over curated, and the prices are a little bit too high for my taste now, which is kind of disappointing, but oh well. Okay, so
and Lori,
yes.
One quick question. Just Lori, you're up in Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm in Texas, and I've seen a few of those, but it would be prohibitive to get it up to you. So never mind that thought.
It probably wouldn't be that much to ship it.
Well, I'll keep my eye out and I'll reach out to you if I see one. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If anyone sees one, I am definitely in the market for one because I fell so in love with those garments that had it. I would buy one today if I could get my hands on one.
What you might consider doing is there's a place, if you're in the New York area, there's a place called So Right. It's in Bayside, Queens. And Steve is the owner. And they sell all sorts of machines, but I don't think it would be out of line to call him and say, this is an odd request. This is the machine I'm looking for. Because any machine that comes through their store,
Yeah.
self-service, and you
Yeah.
just say, "This is what I'm looking for. Can you get me one?"
Yeah.
And he will probably be able to do that.
I'll do that because I'll drive to Queens. I mean,
Yeah.
now everything's vaccinated,
I
so
mean,
I'm happy
that's
to.
where I get my machines serviced. I will actually take my machines on the subway and the bus to Queens
Yeah.
to get them
Okay.
serviced. So they're good people. Okay, so other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna do the screen share. We're gonna be doing the piping. It's kind of a deep dive. Like I said, it's about 45 minutes. If you have questions, as always, ask the questions. I can stop the video. And so this is like all you need to know about piping, what we're afraid to ask. So let us begin. Okay, we're off and running.
Making a piped edge is not as difficult as.
And everyone can hear? Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
One of the hallmarks of a piped edge is an even thickness all along the seam and no visible stitching between the ground fabric and the piping. That's what this lesson will be covering. We have a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. Part of the success of this project is using what I call the proper fill. Now these three here, these are examples of the fills that I like to use. These two here, the white is rat tail, the gold is mouse tail. Rat tail is 3 millimeters wide, mouse tail is 2 millimeters. They're pretty much the same kind of cord. What I like about these is that the cord is rigid. It doesn't smash down. It's not terribly spongy. And so you can really, really get a nice smooth surface. This also has a smooth surface. Now on the smooth surface, if you're using something like a charmeuse, any other kind of fill is going to it's going to read through the fabric. The texture will read through. This has a nice smooth surface, so you are assured of an even thickness all along, and you are assured of a flat surface all along. This here, this is what's called shoelace. Shoelace comes in a variety of diameters. It's a bias cover over a core. Again, it's not too spongy, so it makes a very firm result in the final product. You don't need a lot of fancy tools for this, but what I like is this is a generic adjustable zipper foot. This is the 1/4 inch wide. I think it's the best. Now, the reason I like this is that you turn the screw and you can adjust the foot to one side or the other of the needle, and you can adjust the foot so that the needle is either close in or right at the edge. You'll see this a little more as we go along. But this particular foot, this is on an adapter for Bernina. It's a generic foot. You can get it for most machines. So, generic adjustable zipper foot, something you want to have. For the piping, I'm going to be using rat tail. And so we're assuming a 5/8 of an inch seam. So the strips will be 1¼ to 1½ inches. I'm just going to say 1 3/8 just to split the difference. There we have our bias strips. Once you've cut your bias strips, you want to press them to relax the bias. And from here, we'll go to the machine to fill the piping. Before filling the piping, we want to adjust the foot so that the needle is as close into the little notch as possible, the zipper foot in position number 1. I tend to like using the left side of the foot to fill piping. Some people like to use the right side, but either way, the needle is as close to the inside of that curve as you can get. Now your stitch length for filling the piping is going to be 4 to 5. You don't need a short stitch here. You just need to hold it together. Next, we lay the fill, the rat tail, on the wrong side of the fabric, and we fold here. Sometimes if you want to put a pin in there, you can. And we lower the foot. Now, the beauty of the rat tail is that it's a rigid cord, so you can really put the edge of the foot right up next to the cord. You don't have to worry about the foot running over the cord. So you're going to get even thickness all along the cord. Since the foot is in position number 1, not a final seam, when you look at the finished piping, you're going to have a little bit of slack. That's what you want, because the final seam is going to come in where my thumbnail is and be a little closer to the cord, so that all of the stitching you've used before the final seam goes into the seam allowance. Almost done. That is what we have. Our next step is to attach this to the body. So here we have our sample, and these are the right sides facing up. So I'm going to put it on the front side, and I'm assuming a 5/8 inch seam. Now this is one of those fun little things that people don't really realize, but the seam gauge here, that distance is 5/8. So what you can do is zoom in, because you really want to see this. You want see, if you notice, you can see down here that the edge of the seam gauge is a little bit past the stitching. That's what you want, because the final seam is actually going to land at the edge of the seam gauge. So when you're basting your piping down, if you're assuming a 5/8 inch seam allowance, you can use that little edge to baste. And I tend to baste with a double thread. And especially on a curve, if you really want to tightly control where that piping falls, the best way really is to baste. These basting stitches will come out later, obviously, but for the time being, they're in. Now, what you can do in here to make this go around the curve a little more readily, you can make some clips about halfway in, and then see how nicely that opens up. So again, check it as you're going around. because you're going to baste it first. We'll baste it down. Our next step will be at the machine, which you'll see in just a moment. So I'm going to go off camera and finish this, and I'll bring it back in just a moment. Okay, all done. From here, we go over to the machine. Now at the machine, the foot is still in position number 1. Change threads so you can see how this works. We're still going to use a fairly long stitch for between 4 and 5. We just want to tack this down.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So position number 1 is with the needle to the very closest point of that inside as you can get.
Yes,
Okay, thank
absolutely.
you.
And the thing to remember is that anything that is not a final seam, when we're filling the piping now here, when we're basting the piping to one side, we will work with the foot in position number 1. Later on, position number 2, you'll have the needle right at the edge of the foot. So that's the distinction between the position 1 and position 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And when you're steering, you can put a little bit of pressure towards the right so that the foot will ride up against the fill in the piping. So this is position number 1. This is not the final seam. We're just nailing this down. So you can see here that the orange stitching and the green stitching are pretty much on top of each other because they're both foot in position number 1. Now from the reverse, you can see the green stitching. That is the stitching we just sewed. This is going to become important in the next step. So back to the work table. So now we have both sides of this sample. So we're going to put right sides together and pin. But notice I'm pinning them together right side up so that the green stitching is visible. That is very important in the next step, because if you can see the green stitching, you don't have to really do much except steer, because you know where your stitches are going to fall. Now you could hand baste this together, you could pin it. If it's fairly complex, you would want to baste it, but for something that's fairly straightforward like this, I'm going to pin. Now I'm going to talk about pinning for just a moment. Notice I pin parallel to the seam, not perpendicular. Debates rage, but I prefer this. I find it's a little easier to manage. From here, we go back to the sewing machine. Before we begin, you can see that I have adjusted the foot so that the needle is right at the edge of the foot. This is important for what we're going to be sewing. I've also changed the thread so you can see the net effect of what we're doing. By having the needle a little closer to the edge, it's going to be closer to the fill, and the green stitching is going to fall in the seam allowance. So we shortened the stitch to a standard 2.5, and sewing, you want to give it a little bit of a pull towards the right. As you sew, foot will stop up against the rat tail. The blue stitching will be slightly to the left of the green stitching, which is what we want. show you the result. There we are. See that? That is what we want. The green stitching is position number 1. The blue stitching is position number 2. So what happens? Usually when you're making piping, you end up seeing the stitching that you used to sew the piping closed. With this, since you sew in the piping with the stitch a little further out, the final stitch will make it so that when you turn it right side out, you can pull it one way or the other, and you have a nice, snug, even thickness all along this seam, and you don't see any of the stitching. But we're not done yet. What I'm doing here is staggering the notches, which you can see here, the little V shape, that's a notch. Same thing happens with clips. If you cut both seam allowances at the same place, you're going to get weird little angles when you turn it and press it. And so, by staggering them so that they fall alternately, what that will do is that will ensure that your seam will press smoothly. Staggering your clips. And now let's turn this right side out. It's starting to look like something. But it's not done yet. Off to the pressing table. We begin by just pressing the seam allowance. You don't want to press all the way on top because you could leave an impression of the rat tail on the outside. And here, from here, we're going to turn this right side out. And what I like to do, instead of just putting the iron down, is I like to hit it with a little steam, and then just finger press it. And then if you want to really flatten it out, then you can use your clapper. But ideally, you should not put the iron on this. I don't think it looks well because you run the risk of pressing shine into your seam allowances. And so here is that not a thing of beauty. Piping. That's how you do it.
So now I'm going to stop for a moment and see if anyone has questions.
I have a question. It's Vivian.
Yes.
Maybe I missed it because I had to run and do something really quickly. The piece of fabric that you use to cover the filler,
Yes.
what bias is that cut on?
It's
what
on
grain line is that cut on?
It's on the true bias, the true 45-degree bias.
Always.
Yes, always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions?
Yes, Kenneth, I got one quick question. You're calling the cord rat tail and like something like that. Is that an actual name of it? Like if I go into a sewing shop, or is it known by something else?
No, the generic term is rat tail cord, and then the thinner one is called mouse tail cord. But if they're starting to kind of look crazy at you, the rat tail is 3 millimeter diameter, the mouse tail is 2 millimeter diameter. But if you search it either on the web or in any place where they have someone who even has a passing familiarity with trims, they all call it rat tail.
Okay, cool. Okay, I just didn't know, because like I said, sometimes you get people and they kind of look at you like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I always shake my head when I'm, because I encounter them even here in New York. You just want to say, why are you working in a place that sells these things if you don't know what you're talking about? But there you have it.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Ken. I have a question regarding the adjustable Bernina
Yes.
foot.
Yes.
Is it compatible? Is it compatible with the industrial sewing machine?
Well, actually, you can get this particular foot. There's the low shank version and the high shank version. The high shank version fits most industrial machines.
High shank.
Yeah.
Where
Now
can
there,
I
okay, there is
buy?
a place called Cutex, Cutex.
Mm-hmm.
They sell sewing machine parts. I've gotten the high shank machines from them.
Mm-hmm. High shank. Okay.
But yes,
Thank you.
because see, we work on Jukies at FIT.
Yeah.
So you know that you could. So I discovered that yes, indeed, the high shank machine, the high shank version fits on the Juki.
Thank you.
Okay. So other questions? Okay, so let us continue.
I'm often asked, how do you sew piping to a corner? So this little lesson is just that, how to navigate corners with piping. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. Here we have the materials for our corner. I've cut some wool, so I have a front and a back. I've also prepared piping. And we have some marking tools. So this is what we're going to be using to start. You baste all of this down as you would for the curved piping. One thing I want to do here is I want to know where to turn that corner. Right there. Then I'm going to stitch in place a couple of times. Hold this. Like so. From here, cut to that dot. And then, see how I roll this up? You want to roll that up because if you try to make it flat, the cord is going to be too short and it will round the it'll make a round corner. So I'm having this sit up and I'm pushing it back slightly. Because this extra slack right in here, you want that when we turn the corner. You notice I baste with the double thread. It's just a preference. There's no hard and fast. You have to do one, you have to do the other. So it's just something to know, just a little bit of an aside.
Kenneth,
Yes.
it's Ruth.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Ruth.
Yeah.
I have a question. When we're looking at that stitching right underneath your finger there, that's when the needle was in position 1?
Position 1, yes.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Baste. Baste down to the main corner. And same thing. Over here, we want to know where that corner is. So again, stitch 2 or 3 stitches there. And cut right there. Again, tip this up. So you notice, see, I'm creating a little bit extra here. That is what you want to do. Because if you go too short, you're going to round that corner. Stitch again a couple times in place. And I'm going to go off camera and hand base this and bring you back the results. So here we are. We have the corners basted. Now we go to the machine. Here you can see that I have the needle. I'll bring this out just a tiny bit. So the needle is inside, well inside the edge of the foot. So we're going to sew the piping down with the foot in position number 1. This is not a final seam. And this is how we're going to do it. Start at the top. And the stitch length is 3.0. You don't have to have a short stitch on this. So coming down to this corner, I'm going to stitch off and start over and stitch to make it a little bit more square.
One moment, please.
Here you can see. So coming down to this corner, I'm going to stitch off and start over and stitch to make it a little bit more square.
Very strange. One moment, please. Technical difficulties. Let me reset this here. I hate when this sort of thing happens. It makes me crazy. Piping. Okay. So let's see.
Right there.
Okay, let's try this one here. Okay. We're back. Ah, geez. Technical difficulties. Okay.
Start over and stitch to make it a little bit more square. see. And then I'm going to turn and come back here and continue. And as we come down here, same thing. Really going to have to kind of navigate this, but there's that. I've stitched there, and then I'm going to turn this back this way. Show you the results here. So you can see we've sewn to there, and I have sewn 90° there. It's going to look like that. Now, back to the work table. So here we are. We put these two right sides together, and then we want to pin. So I'm going to pin these two raw edges first. We're going to stitch this corner in two different passes. Pin that there. And I'm not going to go crazy pinning here, but I am going to pin here because my first pass is going to be, I'm going to sew from here off to here. So what I want to do here is I want to sew some very short hand basting stitches. Now when you get up here, the object here is you want to push that piping as far in as you can get. That way, when you sew these little short stitches, you're not going to risk catching the rat tail. There we are. Okay. So here, lots of basting thread, but there you have it. So I'm going to go to the machine now and sew from here all the way off here. So off to the machine. So here I am at the machine, and you can see that the needle
Kenneth, question here.
just,
Okay, the zipper foot moves and the needle moves.
Well,
So
no,
what,
actually, the zipper, the foot in position 1, position 2 is really, it's not so much a needle setting or anything. It's the relation of the needle to the foot. So in position 1, you have the needle close into, as close as you can get onto the inside of the little notch here. Position 2, it is right at the edge. And so really the thing is that you just want to make sure that your foot is sitting on a feed dog. And sometimes you may have to adjust the needle position. Sometimes you may not.
okay,
Okay. Did that make sense?
yeah,
Okay.
Kenneth, it's Vivian May.
Yeah.
Continuing on that point.
Yes.
If you have a machine that does not allow you to move the needle that precisely,
Okay. Well, then you just use, this is why I like this particular foot, because you can unscrew it. You can move the foot back and forth to get it exactly where you need it. That's why I love this particular foot.
got you. So my machine is not a screw-on for feet; it's a clip-in. This comes in clip-in.
Well, no, actually, if it's a clip-on, it probably has like way up at the ankle, where there is a thing that joins the fitting that holds the clip-on feet to the the support that pushes down on the presser foot. So there's probably a screw kind of up and to the left that you can unscrew and take that whole assembly off and fit one of these feet onto.
Oh, I see. I think I've seen that on YouTube, so
Yeah.
I'll look on mine. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so other questions? Okay, so we'll continue.
Right at the edge. Stop that here. Needle is right at the edge of the foot. So now we're going to go back to a standard 2.5 stitch, and our first pass is going to be so this is position number 2, final seam. What I like to do about here, about say 3/4 of an inch from the corner, is to shorten the stitch length to 0.75 to 1.0. Looks like, and see if we open this up from this side, we will have pushed this one way. So now we're going to go back to the work table to sew the rest. So here we are. And the next stop here is we want to push this way back. We want the piping itself to be all the way in. And you can tell that by feel. So I'm going to pin it right here. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera, and I'm going to get some more thread basting and thread baste to about here. Then I will bring it back to show you the kernel of information here that you need. Now, at this corner here, we're going to baste with some short stitches to make sure everything stays where it needs to stay, which is facing in. And then I will continue on. And there's really no way to get away without doing this with basting. I just want to tell you that. Don't try to save time by just trying to wing it with pins, because it won't work. Okay, so here we are. And so I have massaged everything back away from these stitches. So now I can sew with some very short hand basting on the blue stitching line, because that will fall into the seam allowance when we're finished. So I have hand basted from here to here. So now we're going to go back to the machine, and we're going to start here and stitch off to there and start there and stitch back this way. So that is how we're going to sew this on the machine with the zipper foot. So back to the machine. So here we are, zipper foot in position number 2. Again, stitch length is 0.75 to 1, because we want these stitches to be quite short. And so, just lower this down a teeny bit. So you're going to sew ever so slightly to the left of the blue stitching. Position number 2, final seam. 3/4 of an inch, then you lengthen your standard 2.5. So off here, I'll show you. So there, and that sews off here, and we're going to come back here and sew down the other way to make that corner. So let's this pull out a little bit so you can see. So yeah, you see the green stitching is the stitching we just sewed, position number 2. So next, we will go to the pressing table. Actually, I decided to clip the corners. I just think it's fair that you get to see this. So here, on the main corner, you're just going to cut it like that, about 1 millimeter between the stitching, and then here on this one, so yeah, so here we are, ready to turn right side out. So I will flip this right side out. So here I have everything turned right side out, ready for pressing. So the initial press is there and here. Now, to get a square corner, as square as you can get, what you're going to do is you're going to take a needle threaded with double thread of Mara 30. You're going to catch that, and you're going to pull it as you steam. So normally I would put a pressing cloth on this, but not for this. This is a sample. And if I want to get this corner squared, same thing. You just give it a little bit of a tug. So here you have it. It looks pretty darn good. One more little trick here. Pinch it like that. So that is the way that I get a square corner. And here we have it. Piping on a corner.
So questions? Because I have one more little piece that I'm going to show you, but I think I'm going to stop right now and see if you've all like gone to sleep or left the building. Yes, Linda.
Do you ever top stitch once you put your piping in? Do you then go around and top stitch ever?
I'm not wild about that look. I've seen it. So, that is kind of a personal preference sort of thing. Okay. So
Vivian, I may have missed this again. I apologize. The width of the cover fabric for the filler.
1.25 to 1.5 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that depend on whether it's rat tail or mouse tail?
If it's mouse tail, you could use 1.25 inches. I cut 1 3/8 inches for this to kind of split the difference. See, the thing about this is I tend to go a little wider because you can always trim it down.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
other questions? Okay, so let's see. Let me round up one more thing, and then, here we are. So, joining. Okay, so if there are no other questions, this is like if you're sewing piping all around and you need to join the ends. This is how you join the ends. So here we are.
One question I get asked is, how do you join piping? If you're piping all the way around something, how do you join the two ends? And there is the answer. That's how it looks on one side, and that's how it looks on the other side. So this little video is going to answer the question about how to achieve this kind of perfection. We have a lot of work to do, so let's get busy. As you can see here, I have basted the piping. We're assuming this is going all the way around and we need to join it wherever we join. So I've basted the piping on both sides. I've left about 3 inches. You want to have a little bit of room to maneuver here. So what you want to do then, and give yourself a little extra piping. See, what we're going to be doing is we're going to cut the piping down a little bit. We're going to open up the cover, and we're going to sew the cover closed and then lay the piping in after. That's where we're going with this. So let us say that we want the join to be right about there. So if you cut, say, about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, you can always try it out later. 1.5 inches here, 1.5 inches here. These can go away. See, ultimately, we're going to bring the strips together here. So our next step will be opening up this piping. It's much easier to clip the stitches and pull the stitching out. I'm not going to burn through a lot of time making you watch me do this. We're going to take the seam out back to here on both of these. So I will go off camera and do just that and bring you back the result. So as you can see, I have taken the stitches out. So the next step here really is, let's get these out of the way. And really you can pin these down if you really want to, just to get them out of the way. So the next step here is we want to put these strips right sides together. And this is one of those times when you can join the bias strips not sewn on the straight of grain. You know, usually you sew it on a straight of grain. And so what I found here is what's a little easier to kind of get your bearings is you can create a crease there, and then you can bring this over to there. So then you know where you can put your seam. And so I'm going to pin this together. And then what you want to do is you just want to see if this is going to lie flat, or if you need to make it a little shorter. So it lies flat. Now the next step, I will take this over to the machine and sew. And I'll sew with a shorter stitch, like 1.0, 1.5. You want a short stitch because you're sewing the piping. I will bring this back after I've sewn it. I decided instead to meet you at the pressing table because we have to press this open anyway. This is where the point presser comes in really handy. So what we want to do here is just press this seam open, like so, and then trim these seam allowances to 1/4 inch. You don't want a large seam allowance in there. So this is where we're at. And next I will go back to the work table to pin this together and deal with the fill. So here we are. Now you can see that we've sewn this so that this is the proper length. If you have to restitch it, if it's a little bit too long, I would recommend you go back and restitch, because you want all of this to lay flat. And now the next step is going to be, and this is important, so you want to lay the two ends of the fill parallel, right next to each other. And I like to make the cut right on the seam, because you're going to, the object here is you want both of these fills to sit end to end. And so having them sit end to end over the seam is going to camouflage that slightly. So we're going to just come in here and just make a cut. This is where you want good scissors. See how those two sit end to end? That is what you want. Now, we're going to bring this down and over. Pull out a little bit. And then I'm going to pin all of this down and go get some needle and thread and baste them. So I will go off camera and baste all of these seam allowances together and bring you back the result. That's how it should look at this stage.
Kenneth, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you baste the piping? Can you stitch the piping ends together, the cording, the rat tail together before you get to this stage?
You mean the
cording?
You know, I wouldn't. You know, I think, you know, after you cut them, if you really feel they're going to separate, you could actually go in and sew them end to end. But I wouldn't put too much thread in there, because it might read through.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just didn't know if a little stitch would just prevent it from separating, or if it just didn't matter.
That actually couldn't hurt. So yeah, you know, make it a single thread, and you know, stitch it maybe once or twice. That couldn't hurt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so. Oh, come on. What the heck? Over here. There we go.
I'm back. Everything is basted in place. Our next stop is the sewing machine. So here we are at the sewing machine, and as you can see, I have the zipper foot on, and the foot is in position number 1. So you can see that the needle is somewhere on the inside of this curve, and I've set this for a 3.5 length stitch. And just pull this out just a tiny bit. So now, it's a simple matter. Coming in here. And sewing. Now, a little note. I didn't sew the piping down before I did all of this stuff. But what you could do is you could sew the piping down to one end and then start on the other end. You can machine it down in stages.
Kenneth, it's Vivian, sorry.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means?
Okay, you know, notice I had it basted where I had it basted at either side. You could actually go ahead and do the stitching in position number 1, and then go back and join the two ends later. I know that didn't make much sense on the...
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, okay.
Show you the result here. So there we have it. Like I said, you could have sewn the initial sewing to here, stopped it, done all of this, or you could do it all in one pass. But now we are ready to go back to the table, and I will pin everything right sides together and sew this to finish. Back from the machine. And so now, this is pretty straightforward. This will look very familiar. So I will take this over to the machine, sew everything with the foot in position number 2, press it, and I'll bring you back the result. And here we have the finished product. Now, as you can see, the thickness doesn't drop off because the 2 ends of the fill are sitting edge to edge, and they're sitting right behind the seam, which makes it so that they don't pad out. And you can see also it doesn't make a hinge. Here is the reverse. So there you have it. If you need to join the ends of your piping, this is the cleanest way.
Okay, so questions.
I have
Yes,
a
can I
question.
go? Oh,
Okay, who? So who?
Jeremy, go ahead. Kenneth, all right, I'll ask you real quick. First of all, number one, that I like that better than other methods I've seen of just trying to merge the 2 together and
Doesn't work.
yeah.
This is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, off topic. What's the model of your iron?
I'm the reliable I600 or 600i. It's
Okay.
the here. I'll show you what it looks like. There it is. Is that not beautiful?
Yeah, I want to get one. I may get a lower model, but I do want something like that, I think.
Well, you know, they have a smaller one, and it works just as well. I have used both of them, and they are both excellent irons. This one, how I got this one is a friend of mine. It's kind of funny. She called me because I had the earlier version of this, and she called me and said, "Would you like a new iron?" I said, "Well, yeah, that's kind of a random question, but okay, why?" And she bought it, and it kept setting the fire alarms off in her apartment. And so she had, I said, okay, I'll take it. So that's how I got this one.
So the model you have, is it just because it's bigger, like an iron in the water holder?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about space in my place and
Yeah,
just.
the i300 is the reservoir is smaller, but
Okay.
the whole setup and how it performs is just the same.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Who else had other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Would you do this the same if you were using like a thick piping cover, like if you're doing vinyl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now with the vinyl, one thing you might run into is that the presser foot is, it's metal and it might stick to the vinyl a little bit. So this is a little trick. There is you can get Teflon tape. I know that sounds crazy, but Teflon tape that you can stick to the bottom of your presser foot. And having that Teflon tape is going to make it so that the foot will slide more readily over vinyl.
Mm-hmm. Do you do anything about the seam of the join being kind of fat?
You want to keep it as narrow as you can get it. Yeah. So about a quarter of an inch at the most.
Okay.
And with vinyl, a lot of times you can't really, it's difficult, if not impossible, to press. But what I would do is to hammer it, because I do that with leather too. So if you hammer it flat, that should get it as flat as you can get it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Who else has questions?
Vivian.
Yeah, Vivian.
Yeah. Off topic again. When is it appropriate to pin perpendicularly versus vertically?
Well, now, like I said, debates rage, and there are people who only pin perpendicular, but if I'm wanting to ease something, because when you're easing, say, a sleeve cap to the bodice, you have the longer layer against the feet of the machine. That then works better if you pin everything perpendicular. But other than that, I tend to pin it parallel because that's how I was trained. My teacher, all those years ago, she always taught us to mark a stitching line, and then you pin based so that you make sure that both stitching lines are pinned one on top of the other. And if you pin it with the raw edges up and you pin it right to left, when you turn it on the machine, the pins are oriented so that you can just grab the head of the pin and the machine will take the fabric off the pin. So you're less likely to hit the pins with your machine needle.
Okay.
So that, like I said, again, debates rage. Some people only pin perpendicular. If that works for them, all good. There's no like right or wrong answer on this, but that's how I do it. And I find that for me, it helps me to control the fabric much more easily.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So who else? Yes, Renee.
Can you talk about piping a V, and also what do you do with the ends? Like if I'm piping a princess seam, what do I do at the end of it? Do I just cut out the filler and,
Yeah. So if you're
or
taking,
do I run it off?
okay. So say if you're taking a princess seam up to a shoulder, what I would do is I would thin it out. And so how you thin it out is you put a pin, through the rat tail, through the piping, and make sure you catch the rat tail. And you measure back from where you've cut the piping. You measure back how much shorter you want the rat tail so that it goes up to the seam, but it doesn't go into the seam. So then you're going to slide the cover back and measure backwards so you know how much to cut the rat tail shorter. Are you with me? And then you cut the rat tail, then you pull everything so that the cover will go into the seam, but the rat tail will stop right at the seam or slightly in front of the seam. Now, the making a V, I talk about that in my Cool Couture book. I was hoping to get that video done for today, but sadly I did not get that. But if you if you have the Cool Couture book, it should be in there. It's a little more complicated than I can explain just with words. Okay. Okay. So who else? Is everyone? Oh yeah, Lori.
May I ask an unrelated question?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you do when you're grading a heavily gathered skirt that you're sewing onto a bodice? Would you just, you obviously would grade grade the gathered part, but otherwise it's going to be too heavy up in the bodice. So just like halfway kind of thing, or?
I would say halfway. And the other thing I like to do if I'm working on, on a gathered part is, if possible, press that as flat as you can.
I did that. I mashed it down. Yeah.
And so then, so the gathering, you're going to want that narrower than the seam allowance next to it, because the seam allowance next to it is going to pad that out so it doesn't read quite so much in the finished garment.
That's what I thought. I just thought I'd check since it's right here in front of me right now.
Okay, so other questions? Well, I guess I guess our work is done then. So I would like to thank you all for taking the class. And as I said earlier, if you have questions, for those who didn't quite get to the end of the code, please don't be shy about emailing me, because I'm happy to answer the questions. And also, I'm really happy to answer any questions. What I would say is email rather than Instagram, because I'm really bad about typing, because I only type with one finger on Instagram because I'm just kind of lame that way. So so email is always good.
Can I ask a question about your next class?
Yes.
Do you have any idea when your next extended class is going to be offered, like month-wise?
Okay. The next one I'm doing is the Hidden Pockets class. That's 3 Wednesday evenings. And if you'd like, email me, because I can send you the information on that. And then the next one after that is going to be a 3-period, because it's going to be a sew along. It's going to be how to finish the tops of the invisible zipper.
Okay.
Because, because I've had people say this, and and in the class this spring, I had a student say, like, okay, what do I do with the zipper now? And so, it's a fair question. And so what I'm going to do first is outline, kind of go through how we use the Linda Maynard invisible zipper. And of course, this video is going to be a little longer than Threads, because Threads is really good at editing. So it's installing that invisible zipper like Linda Maynard has taught us, and then 3 different ways of finishing the ends. You know, because other than, you know, for a skirt, it's easy to throw it, have the ends of the zipper go into the waistband. But if you're dealing with a neckline, it's a little different. So that's going to be what we're teaching there. So then from there, the next long form, this is my little sample here. The long form is going to be a lace jacket. And more specifically, a guipure lace jacket, because guipure is a little bit spongier than other kinds of lace. And so, you know, when you see it, in the literature, I've seen, you know, Susan Calgi teaches the guipure lace skirt. And so, you know, you have to kind of mount it and stabilize it to keep it from stretching and going out of shape. And so what this sample was, I understood it's like, okay, I want to make a lace jacket, but I had to do some kind of making of samples to figure out, okay, how am I going to handle this? And so I figured out how to stabilize it so that it's going to wear well. That's probably going to be closer to the fall. So because I would kind of like to have a little bit of summer, because, you know, last summer was not a summer really. So so yeah, and so, you know, you're on my mailing list, so I will send the emails out. But if you want the information for the pockets class, because there are still spaces, just email me and I can send you the information.
Okay, thank you so much. And I really appreciate that you're willing to answer questions. And I just wanted to say, I found a real fabric store on my travels outside of Nashville, and a woman approached me. I was looking at buttons. She asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was taking your class, and she just raved that she had taken a class with you and Susan, and was very excited about the Zoom class. And then evidently the clerk who worked there had worked in a store that you had shopped in when you were in San Francisco, and walked in and said that you wanted 10 yards of something.
Oh,
and
15 yards actually.
Okay, and later revealed that you really didn't know what you were
no idea what
doing.
I was doing. It was so funny.
It was so lovely.
The story is,
It was
for those
so
who didn't
lovely.
hear it, this is my first paying customer, and she wanted a mother of the bride dress, and I had not measured this woman yet. Okay, she wanted a dress and jacket, but you know, she wanted to go and buy the fabric that day. I'm like, okay then. So we went into Britex, and and we're talking like 1983. So fuchsia pink was a very big color then. It was like the fuchsia pink chiffon, and then the fuchsia pink silk crepe for the dress, and the fuchsia pink lining. And so the gal said to me, how much? And I said, 15 yards of each. And the look on her face was like, I mean, you know, you could just see it in her eyes. You know, I saw like, you've got to be kidding. And I just looked at her and I said, 15 yards of each, please. And I had that damn fabric until I moved to New York. I still had acres of that fabric in my stash. So yeah.
So, yeah, may I ask you, so I am definitely signing up for the lace jacket because I think lace is divine.
Yes, okay.
So because I live in the boonies, I don't get to the city very often. So I do most of my fabric shopping online. I try to buy the dead stock and all that kind of stuff. So when you say pure lace.
Guipure.
Say it again. I'm deaf.
Guipure. Guipure. Now, closer into the class, there are 2 or 3 on, you know, like gorgeous fabrics, and I'm going to be talking with Treadle Yard Goods, and I think one more. I'm going, you know, I actually talked to Anne who owns Gorgeous Fabrics on Tuesday, and I just said, okay, I'm giving you heads up now that I'm going to be needing a selection of these for my students. So start, you know, in your marketing, start looking for that. So I will have 2 or 3 places where I can just, you know, you can go and email them and say, what do you have? And they will have what you need, because I just think that's fair.
Okay, so G Pure is a
Pure. It's a kind of lace. The technical, it's called a chemical lace because they embroider it on a dissolving ground, and then they dissolve the ground.
Okay.
So it's a kind of lace.
Okay, so it's not something that I'm going to find on one of these websites that just.
Well, you know, yeah. So that's why I said I'm trying to line up some sources because I just think that's fair.
Yeah.
because not everyone lives in New York. So,
So God forbid somebody ends up with a bolt of this on one of these websites.
yeah, well,
Ballpark, how many yards should I buy?
well, this is a, and I have the pattern. The pattern you can get at the Sewing and Design School. It's a cardigan jacket. So I want to say 3.5 yards would give you plenty to work with.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So now, Ruth, you look like you had a question.
Yeah, actually, it was going back to the zipper class that you're running.
Yes.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, for the invisible zipper, I don't have an invisible zipper presser foot.
You don't need it. If you have the generic
Okay,
zipper,
the Bernina. Yeah.
well, actually, no, just the one that, you know,
Oh.
the foot that we use here in this class. If you have that, you're all good.
Do you have any idea how long it would take to get up here? I'm in Canada.
You know, it's going to be a couple weeks, but you know, I'm happy to send it. You know, the shipping will be a little extra because, you know, Canada, but I've had several people.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and let's see, Lori, how long did it take for you to get yours?
I don't know, like, yeah, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a couple
And
weeks.
the shipping wasn't that. I think it was $20.
Yeah.
But
So-
I think I got a stiletto or something with it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I'm not going to hold you up. I'm not going to like empty your pockets for shipping, but yeah, I'm happy to send them to Canada because honestly, that foot, you know, I sew zippers with, you know, because I sew zippers with it. Yeah. I sew, as you can see, I sew piping with it. I also use it if I'm sewing like inside corners, like diamond gussets or that corner at the shoulder for a shawl lapel jacket. That foot has served me so well. I cannot do without it.
And how much does the foot cost?
Well, the foot itself is $50 with shipping. And so, you know, you would tell me, because see, what I sell it with is if you have, especially if you have a new Bernina, the new style Bernina, the adapters will not accept this foot. So what I do is I have to shave off, you know, I have to go on my grinder and shave it off so that the foot can slide freely back and forth. And so, you know, the foot, the adapter, the shipping in the US, $50.
Okay.
So I have a Bernina 740.
Yeah, this would fit that.
Has the clip-on feet, right? So this would fit.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
other questions? Well, then I want to thank you all for taking the class. I so look forward to seeing you. And if you want to send me photos of your coat when you're done, I would love to see it because, you know, it's just fun to see the finished project. And, you know, again, if you have any questions, you know, don't be shy about asking. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
This has
Kenneth.
been so
Thank you.
informative.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
So go
Learned a
enjoy your
lot.
weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay,
You
bye.
too. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
See you again.
Bye.